Laboratories are the hub of life-changing medicines and treatments, from cancer research to understanding the human brain. But not everything that takes place in the lab has a happy ending. Something I've always had a strong thought about is that there are things going on in secret labs that are so shocking and unheard of that they could never be made public. This is just my thoughts, but do you think it's naive to think that humans are not still being tested on in the lab in incredibly unethical ways? And the same for animals. Just think about it. Do you think for one moment, if an animal was somehow cloned, or a monstrous hybrid humanoid was created, we would ever hear about it? I personally think we are kept in the dark about such things. But from two-headed dogs to human pigs, here are 5 of the most insane lab-created hybrids, experiments, and even success stories that we know of. As always, sit back and enjoy. Monkey Head Transplant by Robert J. White. Robert Joseph White was a controversial American neurosurgeon who performed over 10,000 surgical procedures and wrote numerous papers on healthcare and medical ethics. However, he is best known for performing head transplants on live monkeys, and in 1970, after many years of research and preparatory testing on monkeys, he successfully transplanted one monkey head onto the body of another. The crude surgery involved cutting the animal's spine at the neck to remove their heads and transplanting one of their heads onto the other's body. Remarkably, the monkey with the transplanted head lived for 9 days, and because the cranial nerves were still intact and supported by the circulatory system of the new body, the monkey could still hear, taste, smell, eat, and follow objects with its eyes. Ultimately, the monkey died as the body rejected the transplanted head. During the 1990s, White announced that he had planned to perform the same operation on humans. He hoped that he could do head transplant surgery on the physicist Stephen Hawking and the paralysed actor Christopher Reeve. He was unable to perfect the technique to be viable to use on humans. White died on September 16, 2010, at the age of 84. And to date, scientists are no nearer performing head transplants than they were in 1970, when White's monkey died. Or so we are led to believe. The human cross rabbit Chimera. In 2003, Chinese scientists at the Shanghai Second Medical University successfully combined rabbit eggs with human cells. The embryos were the first human-animal chimeras to be successfully developed, and the embryos were allowed to evolve for several days in a laboratory dish before they were destroyed and their stem cells were harvested. The hybrid embryos contained human and animal DNA. Although this is not a new technique, as previously human cells and cow eggs have been fused together, this is the only time the procedure has been successful, and scientists are hoping that this would lead to a new and unlimited source of embryonic stem cells for research, and eventually for medical use. However, the ethics of such a procedure were brought into question, and some theorized about what monster could be created if the embryos were transferred to a womb to develop. The Two-Headed Dog. In 1937, young scientist 21-year-old Vladimir Demikov designed the first ever cardiac assist machine, a pump mechanism that was able to take over a heart's cardiac function for a full 5.5 hours. This was a truly groundbreaking invention. But Demikov's research took a different role when in 1946 he completed a heart transplant on a dog. Remarkably, the dog survived for 5 months, and he continued performing transplants on dogs and successfully transplanted a lung and a cardiovascular bypass. He soon became highly respected in the medical community, with some crediting him with having the most significant early impact on the study of heart and lung transplants than any other person in history. Yet despite this pioneering research that probably paved the way for the human heart and lung transplants we see today, Demikov is better remembered for his bizarre creation of living, breathing, two-headed dogs. One day after completing a heart transplant procedure, Demikov decided to carry out another experiment using the dog's head. He wanted to see if he could keep just the head of the animal alive. He removed the head and pumped it with oxygen-rich blood and other nutrients in order to feed the brain. Astonishingly, the experiment was somewhat successful. Remarked by his success, Demikov took things a step further, and by the mid-1950s, he had developed a technique where he transplanted dog heads onto another dog's body. The transplanted second head of the dog was able to see, eat, and drink, and the dog it was transplanted on also remained alert and stable. Many of the two-headed dogs lived for many months, even though the burden and cardiovascular demands of the second head were hard for the original dog to maintain, meaning it could barely lift its own head off the floor as the second head fed off its resources. When the Soviet Minister of Health reviewed Demikov's barbaric experiments, they declared his work was unethical, and he was instructed to stop his research. Demikov was addicted though, and despite warnings, continued with his cruel experiments. Eventually, the potentially brilliant scientist was ostracized by the medical community and labelled the mad scientist. Demikov died at the age of 82 in 1998. He was penniless, forgotten, and living in poverty. Kal August Weinhold. In 1817, a notorious physician called Kal August Weinhold carried out a series of macabre experiments on kittens to prove that he could bring animals back from the dead. If you are an animal lover as I am, then you may find some of this disturbing. In previous experiments, Weinhold had discovered what he called bimetallic electricity, where he could generate an electrical charge by placing certain metals in contact with one another, and that he believed were capable of stimulating nerves and muscles in dead animals, and ultimately humans. Weinhold's first experiment was on a 3-week-old kitten. He chopped its head off, and the animal died immediately. He then applied the electrical charge to the dead creature's muscles, and they automatically responded. Thrilled by the response, he then cut out the headless kitten's spinal cord and filled it with an amalgam of silver and zinc, which he claimed created bimetallic electricity that restarted the kitten's heart, and it stood up momentarily before dying for the second time. Weinhold was excited by the response and acquired another kitten. This time he removed its brain and filled the cavity with the same metallic liquid. He claimed that the electrically charged cat raised its head and opened its eyes, then tried to crawl and jump before becoming exhausted and collapsing. Weinhold maintained the poor kitten was alive for at least 20 minutes, and he became convinced that this was proof he could bring dead animals back to life. Weinhold conducted several more experiments on poor, defenseless creatures. Unsurprisingly, it seems no one has ever successfully replicated what Weinhold had attempted, and for ethical reasons, let's hope they never will. Human cross pig. In early 2017, scientists revealed that they had created a human-pig hybrid, but it's not exactly how you think. Human stem cells were injected into early-stage pig embryos, and then transplanted into surrogate pigs. The embryos were then allowed to progress in the surrogate pig's womb until they were around 28 days old, which is equal to the first trimester of a normal pig pregnancy. The embryos were then extracted from the pig, and tests on them showed that although they were predominantly pig, they did have around 10,000 human cells. This opened up the possibility of being able to grow human organs inside of an animal for use in human transplants to generate human hearts, livers, and kidneys. However, it's thought that functional and transplantable tissue or organs created this way is a long way off. And of course, the ethical concerns are hampering the process, but the chances of an intelligent hybrid creature with a humanized brain accidentally being released into the wild is not impossible, although highly unlikely, due to the supposed restrictions in place. So that's 5 of the most insane lab creations that we know of. I'm sure this is nothing compared to what is not released to the public. We are actually working on a zombie documentary, which kind of falls into this category, and it sure will open your eyes to some very bizarre hybrids and possibilities of creating something in the lab that should never be created. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.